Have you ever sat and stared up at the stars and wondered, where did we come from? Let's take a journey like no other, not to a place, but to a time. Join us as we delve deep into the human past and explore our shared human origins. Welcome to the world of paleoanthropology. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the world of paleoanthropology. Today we have another underground astronaut who many of you probably know. Why don't we let her introduce herself?
Hi, my name is Becca Peixotto.
Becca, it is so great to have you here. So let's start with this. Why do you do what you do, and what is it?
Well, I'm an archaeologist, and I do that because I'm curious about the past and what we can learn about people in the past and what that might tell us about our present and even our future. I also like the adventure of it, being outdoors and doing excavations and finding new things.
That is awesome. And, that passion for these things is definitely visible in the work that you do. And, if so, why don't you are one of those, very few and special individuals who have been in Rising Star and doing this immaculate and extravagant work on this new species. What was it like being down there, and what is your most memorable thing from it?
Gosh, it's hard to pick a most memorable thing. I've spent so much time in Rising Star in different in the cave and different trips down there, down to South Africa, right? There was the 2013 expedition that was when it was all new to everybody, and then there have been many trips since then to conduct excavations and check out the Rising Star cave system, and not just the Dinaledi chamber. And so overall, the thing that really stands out, yeah, sure, we've made some cool science discoveries, yay, but the thing that really stands out for me is the people that I get to work with, and the way that we all go underground with each other's safety in mind and with a common goal and a common joy and enjoyment of the work that we're doing. That's the thing that really stands out for me across the whole, what are we now, 2013 to 2021, however many years that is, 7 years or so
Right.
of the project.
I mean, and that is that's a form of teamwork that I feel like is not necessarily always present at other excavations, simply because it's so dangerous what you guys were doing, going so far underground. And I know like Stephen Tucker and Rick Hunter obviously were the first ones through there. But I mean, did you have any idea of did you have any expectations of what you were getting involved in when you found, or when Lee contacted you, or anything like that?
I mean, we knew it was a cave. We knew it had some narrow squeezes, and I'd done caving before, so I sort of had that general sense. But um, you know, we all went, and you've probably heard this from the other folks as well. We all went to South Africa in 2013, thinking we were going to find a few bones of some species we already knew about, right? And so the expectations and what was found were really different. And the expectations of what the work would entail was also, turned out to be different. It wasn't just a quick in and out kind of salvage operation. It turned really quickly into a research kind of operation. And that's cool and exciting. The cave's dark. It's more humid than I thought it was going to be. I get into some of those kind of details, right? It's way more humid than I thought it would be. Because it was humid, it felt warmer. I went to South Africa in 2013 with, long underwear that I felt like I could wear in the cave, because other caves I'd been in North America felt cool when you went underground.
Yeah.
And this one's so humid that, even though the temperature's stable, it just feels it feels really warm in there sometimes. So I never wore my long underwear underground anyway. So yeah, there's some things like that were different from what I expected. I went in pretty open-minded, I thought, I'm not a paleoanthropologist by training. I'm an archaeologist. I have a lot of background in outdoor education and experiential education and leading wilderness trips and those kinds of things. So, taking those skills to bear into this sort of new to me at the time field of paleoanthropology. And you mentioned the teamwork a minute ago, and it's a different level because there is that safety element to it. But and I think this gets lost sometimes, that paleoanthropology, archaeology, all of this stuff is a team sport. Right. And we forget about that. And I don't think that we as a field have been very good at highlighting that in the past. And, maybe that's one of the things that Rising Star is bringing forward, is that it takes a whole lot of people with a whole lot of different specialties to make any of this stuff work, whether you're 30 meters underground or you're on the surface.
Most definitely. And I've learned recently, not super recently, but just what you're saying is how interdisciplinary the fields are and how they do depend on each other. A lot of people do gloss over that. It's not just bones. It's you need, geological data, you need all that kind of stuff. And so you talked about the cave being humid, which Marina mentioned when I talked to her. What effect does that have on the fossils? Is that, obviously they're well preserved, so is that because how humid it is, or is that?
So, I don't know that we fully understand that for Rising Star yet. Like, what does this humid, and has it been that humid for the last 250,000 years, or is that a more modern development because the exterior climate or the amount of water falling on the surface and all of that has changed? And there's been I think that maybe some of the work that's been done with dating and studying the calcite in the caves and seeing those layers, that may give some indications. And there's a kind of a crazy line in preservation of artifacts or of bones or whatever, of like, really dry tends to be pretty good for lots of things. Really wet is also really good for lots of things, but that in the middle kind of thing, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's really bad. So I don't know, if the 99% humidity that's currently in the air there, what impact that really has on the preservation of these bones in particular. I don't know that we fully understand that. That'd be a question for maybe somebody like Tabojo, who does the geology and could tell you a little more about the long-term conditions underground, or any one of the taphonomists, maybe Patrick Randolph Quinney. Maybe he could shed some light on what humidity does to bones that are at the surface. A lot of the bones were completely in sediment, right? So maybe that mitigates the impacts of the humidity. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know that anybody's asked me that one before.
Okay, well, something for me to look into.
Yeah.
So what are you doing right now? It's pandemic. I know you're not in South Africa at the moment. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I work for the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, which is a part of the DoD that's charged with finding missing service members from previous conflicts. So for me, it's mostly World War II. But yet we can't travel. Pandemic, right? So doing lots of planning, helping other teams go into the field in different places. Just before you called, I was going through somebody's site photos, trying to find all the good ones. It's a hard process because there were lots of good pictures. So yeah, I'm still working in archaeology, of course, but stuck at home like everyone else. So, well, not quite everyone else. There are people in the field right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. But definitely this, has affected, I think, everyone in this, not only this field, but
Mhm.
I mean, in reality, every field, everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm just happy that perhaps this is actually an opportunity for scientists to maybe do more research into what they've already found instead of finding more. I feel like this is a good time to do that. Um, I mean, when for Rising Star, obviously, I remember initially, I know there's more now, but there were something like 1,500 fossils found or pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has that initial amount even been gone through yet?
Yeah. So all of the fossils, I will say that
That you
all of
can
the
say?
fossils that
Okay.
had been excavated prior to the pandemic
Mhm.
starting, or maybe a year before the pandemic, have been cataloged,
Okay.
right? There are, because of the way these fossils come out of the ground, and because sometimes we're like, there's a lot of little pieces here, so we're going to scoop it up as a bag of sediment and bone, and we'll deal with it when we can actually see in the broad daylight of the lab. Some of that maybe hasn't been gone through yet. I'm not quite sure where that stuff stands. But most things have been cataloged, and yeah, we're way more than 1,500 at this point. We're probably close to double that.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
and remember, some of those fragments are really, really tiny. Some of them are big, and you're like, well, I can tell what that is. And some of them are going to take specialists looking at them very carefully to figure out how they fit together. Some of the folks that prior to the pandemic, the last time I was in South Africa was before the Origins exhibit opened at the Perot Museum in Texas.
Okay. Okay. I know
Because I went
exactly.
down to pick up the bones, right? And some of my colleagues who are specialists in different skeletal elements have been there taking all of these fragments and trying to piece them together and do more studies on them. And you're absolutely right. That's such an important point, that folks like me who do the excavations, we can go and dig up all the bones in the world, and that's cool. We've got 1,500 bones, but it doesn't mean a whole lot unless all of those other people have an opportunity to study them and tell us what's up with those bones. How many of them are infants? How many of them are juveniles? How many of them are adults and older adults? We can learn a whole lot just from that. What condition are their teeth in? What condition are the bones in? Are there, is there any evidence of disease or damage to the bones, all of those kinds of things. And even more information than that, looking at the sediments on specialized tests on the sediments, all of that stuff doesn't happen underground. We bring the stuff up and then we need all of those other people. And that to me is like where those are all new discoveries, and those are all things that are new and exciting. There's been articles published about these bones relating to, being able to talk about the teeth and specifically the diet. That's important, but also, what the life, I guess, of an infant might be like, right? Some of the work that like Deb Bolter and folks like that have been doing on the juvenile remains, right? So yeah, there's just so much to learn. And to me, it's a little bit unfortunate that, when some of those new papers and those new discoveries come out, they don't get like, woohoo, the big Twitter storm, National Geographic
Yeah.
specials and all of that, right? I mean, it's maybe not as exciting footage to see somebody doing this over bones for 24 hours or however long they stare at the same bone, but what they come up with from doing that is super exciting.
Most definitely. Yeah. Most definitely. I know, maybe you've heard of them. I don't know. The Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles. So I visited there recently, not my first time, and I'm actually going there tomorrow for this special workshop. But they have in the museum, their lab that they actually do all their work in is completely just glass panes. So
Mhm.
you can see into it. And I was standing there watching them for a while working on those bones. But I guess that kind of just, you know, we're that kind of people.
Yeah.
But so
When we had the, oh, sorry.
no. Continue.
When we had the bones of Neo, so the
Mhm.
Homo naledi individual that we call Neo, and Sadiba in Texas for the exhibit at the Perot Museum, we had a lab built in as well.
Mm.
And it was amazing, you know, as the curator of that exhibit, to watch people. We had researchers come who, you know, it's expensive to get to South Africa, so people were coming to see to be able to study the bones, and we pull bones off display and put people in the lab, and they were in that fishbowl like you're describing. And it was really interesting for me to watch the guests go by, the visitors to the exhibit go by, and look at these people doing the research and being interested in what they were doing. You know, we'd bring the researchers out sometimes to talk to the folks and explain what they were doing. But, you know, to see a real human handling a real fossil in real time right there in front of you, you know, it's not just science that happens like far, far away, or, you know, in somebody's imagination. Like, there it is going on.
Yeah,
Cool.
most definitely. And I absolutely loved that. And this, since you mentioned Neo, this brings up a question I was going to ask. One thing I have not necessarily understood, although I have not really looked into it honestly, is so I know the first cast that was made of a Homo naledi skull was found out to be not exactly correct, at least compared to Neo's skull. What, I know like the projection of the face is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because the original skull was just not, there was not enough fossils for it, or was Neo just something completely unexpected?
Yeah, well, Neo is also Homo naledi.
Right.
Neo is, there's differences in preservation, right? You have to, that's, you mentioned that they're reconstructions, and they're reconstructions from fragments.
Mhm.
Some of them really small fragments, some of them pretty big fragments, right? And so, and we don't know from Rising Star necessarily if all of those bits and pieces were from the same individual. Obviously, some of them can refit, so we know that's this, you know, the same bone broken part. And there's some mirroring that was done on that original skull, because, you know, we found half of the maxilla but not the other half, but we can assume that they're more or less symmetrical. And those reconstructions are an art form.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I've thought about like reconstructing a skull before, and I'm not that great at puzzles, so I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a puzzle with missing pieces that's three-dimensional, but you don't know what the final shape is supposed to be. So I think, you know, I don't know that the Neo reconstruction is exactly perfect either, right?
Okay.
We have more information there, so, you know, I don't know which one is more accurate, because none of us have ever seen a Homo naledi put together.
Very true.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I have 3D prints of both then.
Yeah. Yeah, the prints are interesting because you can learn a few different things from them, right? And you can see on each one where you're like, is that really how it goes? Maybe,
Yeah.
you know, maybe not. And, you know, we may be looking at skulls from different sexes, or from different ages, or, you know, maybe there's something up with Neo that we haven't quite figured out yet. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'm very much looking. Homo naledi is. I don't know if it's because the story is just so fascinating, or if it's because I literally got into paleoanthropology in 2013 by chance, but they're just my absolute favorite. I am fascinated beyond words at Homo naledi, and I just can't learn enough. And I tried to get to the Perot exhibit so badly, but being a college student, you know,
Yeah.
airfare to Texas was not, and there's my cat.
Whoops. Hello.
Airfare to Texas was not the most realistic
Yeah.
thing. But I'm hoping they visit the US another time in some point. But
Maybe. Yeah.
and there's my cat again. But yeah, I thought it was amazing that you guys did that whole exhibit and how impactful I heard from other people that it was. And I remember watching like Lee, and I say her name wrong every time, Canolaway.
Uh, yeah. I, I'm not gonna try it because I'll probably get it wrong as well.
Okay, okay. I remember when they were taking and shooting all the videos for moving the fossils actually out of South Africa, and it was just so interesting. And just, I mean, what's involved in transporting ancient human relatives across continents?
A lot of paperwork. A lot of paperwork. You know, they're considered the cultural patrimony of the people of South Africa. So it requires permission from the university. It requires permission from the South African Heritage Resources Agency. I think that's what SARA stands for. It requires, you know, from that agency in South Africa. It requires agreements between the university, which is the custodian of the fossils, and the museum where they're going to be housed. It requires permission to bring them into the country, permission to get them out of the country, permission to bring them into US. Lots of arrangements with airlines so that we could carry on extra carry-ons and get special escorts through airports and all of that kind of thing, right? A lot of paperwork, a lot of planning goes into something like that, which is why fossils don't travel very often. You know, the last hominin fossils really that traveled to the US prior were Lucy. And there was some drama around that, about that journey with Lucy. And we were paying really close attention to what that drama had been so that we could try to learn from what went well with that and what maybe could have gone better in terms of relationships with host nations and with museums and expectations. And so yeah, we tried really hard and stayed in contact with the South African Heritage Agency the whole time. We had regular reports that had to be filed, and which was great. You know, that's part of it. And then when the pandemic hit, you know, and everything shut down a week and a half before we were supposed to fly them back to South Africa, you know, then there was more coordination because everybody agreed that it was better off that they stay where they were, and we try to fly them.
So that does bring up another question, because the last time I was talking to, who was it? I think it was Professor Berger himself. He said that Neo and Karabo were in an undisclosed location because of the pandemic. Are they in South Africa safely?
Yeah, they're back in South Africa now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They went back late last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I ask all of my guests, as they know by now, what is, if you have one, your favorite hominin? And I know you're more of an archaeologist, but you gotta have one.
Favorite hominin? Gosh, I'm supposed to say Homo naledi, right? Can I say Homo sapiens?
You can.
Is that
of
cheating?
course you can.
Yeah.
That is, I think that says a lot about, you know, the way we view ourselves, because many people are so, they would not have said that. They'd pick someone else. But I think acknowledging that, you know, we are part of the natural world and we are hominins and we are all that is important, and we're not just above everyone else, everything else. Um, so what's next for you?
For me,
Yeah.
wow, I don't know. I have, so I have a full-time job now. I don't know what's next for me with regard to Homo naledi and Rising Star, pandemic and everything. But I'm still doing outreach for Homo naledi, still talking to classes. I've got a couple of college classes I'm talking to, next month. So I'm still involved in that way. As far as research goes for me, I've had a couple of projects that have been brewing or been working on almost the whole time that Naledi's been going on, the Rising Star has been going on, that are sort of wrapping up in terms of the research and the publication. So just had a publication on Monday or Tuesday that finally came out that it's been like 6 years in the making. So really glad to finally have that out in the world and sort of put that folder, aside on my desktop. And then I've got I'm an a AAAS if then Women in Science ambassador, which is a program that's been going on for a couple of years now. And through that, I have a grant to publish a comic book about my dissertation research. So that we're expecting to get out here, just waiting on the final illustrations. So hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. So that's pretty exciting to get that research out in the world in a different way. So
that sounds awesome. So that brings up the question, of course, what was your dissertation on?
Yeah, my dissertation was on a site, an area called the Great Dismal Swamp, which is in Southern Virginia and Northern North Carolina. And I was researching maroon communities, or communities of, quote, runaway slaves that lived in the swamp from, 1650, 1680 until just the start of the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
So I've started, everybody asks you for a bio if you're going to give a talk. I've started saying that I've worked on 250,000 years of human history, from Homo naledi at that age to this site that's about 250 years old, and now I'm working on more modern things. So yeah, the swamp is a really, really interesting location. And it's, where Rising Star is dark and hard to get to. The swamp those sites are hard to get to in a whole new way. Not dissimilar to, you don't have to crawl through narrow caves, but equally hard to get to as the Rising Star sites. So
I'm sure, yeah. And then that reminded me of a question I wanted to ask again about the Rising Star site. So I know recently, it's only like a few months ago that the paper came out, of getting either DNA or proteins from the sediment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if that is being applied to Rising Star, or if that has failed already, or?
So the paper you're referring to was not specifically about Rising Star, it was more general, right? Yeah, and it's really exciting technology. And that technology has come, that technique and technology has come leaps and bounds in just the last couple of years. So it's really, it's a really cool opportunity. And there has been discussion, there was, when I was last in South Africa, discussion about whether that's appropriate and feasible, whether the sediment that we have meets this similar criteria to where it's been working elsewhere. There's a lot of different things to think about. To my knowledge, they haven't run any of it yet, but I don't know. We won't hear that until the papers come out.
Right.
But yeah, that's cool. It's
definitely
technology, and yeah, it's neat.
And that's one thing I love about these fields in science, where you can find something out or have a theory and it can sit for decades, and then the technology improves enough and you can prove it.
Yeah.
And it's just, science to me is just the ever moving constantly learning idea that people who want more information are striving for. And that's what we're trying to do here. And, you know, it's been, talking to you has been very enlightening and insightful. And I'd like to ask you if you had advice for anyone, let's just stick with archaeology right now.
Mhm.
Um, what advice would you give them? Let's say a undergrad student who wanted to become an archaeologist. What would you tell them?
Wow. I would say, gosh, that's a hard question. I think my advice isn't too different than what I give younger students, and that is don't specialize too early, right? Archaeology is my second career, and I love it. And one of the things that's given me opportunities as an archaeologist is the skills I gained and the experiences I had doing other things. They've given me skill sets that other archaeologists don't have. So it opens doors for me. So, you know, if there's some cool class in an outside department that you want to take and you have the elective space, like I think that stuff's important to do, because it just broadens your worldview. It broadens the opportunities you have to sort of think laterally about the science that you are doing. You know, we were just talking about technology changing so quickly, and some of that change happens because people aren't just thinking on a narrow path, they're thinking really broadly. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, even as you build skills within your specialty, right? And the other thing I would say for folks who want to do field archaeology, specifically who want to be out in the field, would be to get yourself a good, something like a wilderness first responder kind of safety training.
Yeah.
That helps you take care of yourself and your colleagues, and more importantly, helps you recognize and mitigate the hazards and the risks that you might encounter in the field. I think that's really important.
I think that is great advice and something I did not think about. Yeah, definitely basic life survival skills would be, not life survival, but like, I mean, health survival, CPR, things like that,
Yeah.
would be very helpful in the field, especially in these dangerous situations. If you could change one thing from your experiences thus far, and obviously we don't need to go into super detail, but is there anything you would do differently?
Gosh. Um, that's a really hard question. I don't know if there is necessarily something I would do differently. Particularly when it comes to the archaeology, you know, where I am right now with as an archaeologist, you know, there's things I would have written differently in papers and, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
That is even a better answer, because a person that doesn't have regrets and thinks they made mistakes is someone who knows what they're doing. Um, so I think that's a good thing. Um, I think we will wrap up in a little bit, but I have one last question
Mhm.
and then I will let you go. What does the next 10 years to you of archaeology and or paleoanthropology or any of the ology fields, where do you think they're going to be in the next 10 years based on the last 10 years?
Wow. Um, Archaeology is dealing with a curation crisis right now.
Mm,
We have way more things that need to be curated than we have space and resources to curate them. And there are whole dissertations, multiple dissertations waiting for sites that were excavated 30 years ago or more, right? That have never really been analyzed or haven't been analyzed with modern methodologies, not just the science stuff, but the way we think about things now.
Mhm.
And I hope that, you know, we as a field encourage the folks who are coming up to look at those legacy collections and, you know, maybe address some of the curation issues. You know, do we really need every single brick that was found at a site, or can we do some sampling, right? And to help us learn more about those old sites. So that's a hope. I think that climate change is going to really change what kind of sites get prioritized. There's a lot of sites that are at risk. And, you know, we all hope that we can learn how past peoples have dealt with things like sea level rise and other changes to the climate. Maybe we can learn something from those. And then, as you mentioned, this whole technology thing and how machine learning might be useful in analyzing large data sets, or analyzing, you know, even looking at flakes and things like
Yeah.
that. What can we learn from that, and how can machine learning, or, you know, new sampling techniques like you were talking about, the sediment and the proteomics and things like that. I think there's going to be, you know, we're going to find new ways to use all this technology that's being developed and put it to use for our little purposes of finding out what we want to know about the world.
Definitely. And I think that is a very hopeful place to leave off on. And I would like to thank you very much for coming on the show with us and telling your story to all of our viewers. And is there anything you would like to add before I start recording?
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for doing this show and giving your audience an opportunity to hear from the whole range of folks that you have on the show. I think that's really great, because there are a lot of very interesting people doing paleoanthropology and archaeology, and you've talked to so many of them. So
Yeah, it has been so much fun. And again, thank you so much for coming on. So I'm going to stop recording.
okay.
Thank you for adventuring with us into the human past. If you've enjoyed this video, check out our website at www.worldofpaleoanthropology.org and find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.